It's the Gashouse Gang on KMOX and KMOX.com and our KMOX Sports social media channels, including YouTube, which is an absolute must follow on YouTube with Kevin Wheeler. I'm Tom Ackerman. This is our second day of the week as we pair off throughout the week. We had a four-man roundtable, and Kevin, we got into Cardinals, and we're going to do the exact same thing today. Good to see you, buddy. How are you?
Good, bud. How's it going?
Things are great.
Oh, I hear an echo.
Oh well, we're gonna get some of that. We'll iron that out. Audio issues are part of the deal. We go live and we just press the button and go. So here we are as we continue with the Gashouse Gang. If you are not familiar, we go through a lot of subjects, and we're going to start always with the Cardinals. And I think pick up where we were yesterday in terms of roster construction. One thing we did not touch on yesterday that we just we got on a crazy run about personalities. And I thought it was a conversation. You can always go back and watch all of these episodes. That was episode 11. Is power. I'm a big fan of contact. Put the ball in play. Make the defense make plays on you. It was the success of the New York Mets, Kansas City Royals. Dodgers do it well. Other teams do it really well. I want the Cardinals to do it well, but you got to have power packed in there. When you look at this lineup that the Cardinals could put out, what kind of power are we talking about?
Well, that's to me what's really fascinating here. So, like, when you look at last season, now some of this has to do with time missed because of an injury, right? I mean, like Wilson Contreras normally would hit a fair number of home runs, only hit 15 because he missed basically half the year with the injuries. But only two guys topped 20 home runs last year. Goldschmidt hit 22, and then Alec Burleson hit 21. Nobody else had more than 19. And there were a lot of reasons for it, right? I mean, Arenado's power sapped, Jordan Walker spending most of the year in the minor leagues. That's just like, look, I'm with you in the sense that in certain settings, and especially in the postseason, there has to be some power. There has to be some contact. You have the ability to avoid strikeouts in certain situations, right? But over time, like over 162 games, you have to have power in modern game because it's harder and harder now than it has ever been to string hits together. Just look at the league batting average. I mean, like, this is what we're talking about. Stringing together 3 or 4 singles, or maybe a double and 3 singles and a walk. That's a lot harder than hitting a 2-run homer. I mean, like, it's difficult. Doesn't mean it's impossible, and you need to be able to do both. Good offenses do both. So I want to be clear. I'm not saying that this is a team that needs to sell out for power, but they have to hit more home runs this year. And I think that, Tom, that's not going to be that hard to do. Last year, because Contreras missed out. So if you just run through it very quickly, I think it's pretty fair to say that Wilson Contreras with health will out-homer Paul Goldschmidt from 2024. He'll hit more than 22 home runs now that he can play every day. Because he was hitting in the 20s where he would sit once a week, twice a week as a catcher. Now that he can play every day as a first baseman, I think you're going to get more homers there. You should be okay at catcher with the split between Pages and Herrera. Herrera showed really good pop when he played here, and obviously Pages has a little bit as well. I mean, Pages hit 7 home runs in 68 games. So if he hits 10 and Herrera hits 10 or 12, that's pretty good power production from the catching position. Second base will look a little different, right? Because it's probably now. I'm going to work on the assumption that Arenado gets traded, just for the sake of this argument. Because if he stays, I think we have a concern about power at the third base position. But at second base, it's not going to be. I don't think it's going to be Nolan Gorman. I think it's going to be more Brendan Donovan, and he'll be what he always is. So I'm not really worried about an increase or decrease there. I think Mason Wynn's got 20 homer power. He hit 15 as a rookie. I think he's going to hit more as he gets older and gets in and fills out a little bit more and continues to get stronger. Gorman will out homer, no matter what happens. He will out homer what Nolan Arenado did. He did it last year. I mean, Gorman out homered him last year, and he played in 45 fewer games or something like that, right? So You're going to get more power at third. You should get plenty of power from Newt if you can keep him on the field. I think the combination of Burleson and Baker, if Baker makes the team, I mean, like, look at what Luken Baker brought in terms of power in the small sample that he had. I mean, he only had like 49 at bats and hit a couple of home runs. If you can somehow get 25 or 30 out of those two guys combined in the DH or some first base spot. And then you look at right field and you hope that Walker playing every day hits 25. I think you should hit more home runs this year. And part of it will be, Tom, just sticking with power guys that need the at-bats. Now, does that mean you're automatically a better offense? No. Because if Walker strikes out too much or Gorman strikes out too much, there are problems that can pop up there. But I actually think there's a pretty strong argument to be made. This team in 2025 should produce as much extra base power. And I should point out, too, I don't just mean home runs. I know I'm talking about home runs because it's the easiest thing to count, but I'm counting doubles, triples. Why can't Mason win and maybe Victor Scott hit some triples? I don't see any reason why you wouldn't get that. So I think that the power production, the slug, the extra base production should be at least as good this year, if not better.
Your top three guys in slug were Burleson, Donovan, and Wynn.
Yeah.
Mason Wynn is 20 home run potential to me. I think that, he had 15 last year. I think that number is going to go up as he continues to improve his pitch selection. He's already pretty good at it. But I think that's just a matter of, over time, he has power potential without a doubt. I really think the Walker will up this thing. I think Walker has raw power, untapped, and it's just a matter of time. He has to play every single day. I think Donovan is a source of power. I think he could approach the 20 home run range. Like you said, Arenado only was 16 home runs last year. This is very surprising. He played most of the year.
Played 152 games, man.
Busch Stadium is not a home run friendly park. I understand that, but he can pull him down the line. But you play 81 games in other parks. I mean, and the NL Central is full of home run parks: Milwaukee, Cincinnati, Chicago. It's hard to figure.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm worried about, and I know this will probably be a concern for teams in the trade market too, which is why if he's traded, you're going to have to eat a lot of the money because teams are going to be worried about his lack of power the last 2 seasons. Some of that's Busch Stadium, but you're right, Tom. Some of it's not. I mean, he slugged under 400 this year, Arenado did. Like a good slug is, like Wilson Contreras slugged 468. That's a legitimate power guy. Right, 460, 470, that's real power. 500, you're a stud. But like 450 and above is real power. That's where Goldschmidt and Arenado have always been in their careers. And as you pointed out, other than Wilson Contreras, nobody else topped 430 in the slug last year. The closest was Herrera. But that's kind of my point. Some of this is going to be people staying on the field. Some of this, or not just staying on the field health-wise, although that too, but being left out there to do the job and figure it out rather than having the plug get pulled. Because while this is not going to be a team that leads the league in home runs, that's not the point. But you do need extra base hits and home runs to be any kind of a regular offensive team. You can't just be what they were last year all season long. So, I think the upside is there. I think there are plenty of these guys. I think Burleson combined with Baker is a great combo. Now, it's going to be hard to fit Luken because you won't have a lot of positional flexibility there with Contreras playing first base every day. Can you keep Baker on the roster as a guy that only starts against left-handers as a DH and then pinch hits? Maybe, but it's a tough, leaves your versatility kind of stuck if you're going to go that route. So, but I can promise you this, if he plays against lefties, I'll bet you he hits double-digit home runs only facing lefties. I bet he hits 12 to 15 home runs just facing lefties because that's what he does.
Yeah, I would not doubt it at all. I mean, obviously Contreras just took his spot, and then, Baker really, is not a good enough defensive player to warrant playing a lot of first base, but he could learn it. I think that he's definitely a DH prospect against lefties. We'll see if he ends up making the team. I
left a guy out, by the way. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I left out Sajasi. That's a legitimate power guy. I mean, that's a guy that in the minor leagues was hitting 20, 25 home runs a year. So that's another guy who, if he plays regularly, adds to the power. And he's stepping into us. Maybe he's that guy instead of Luken, because Luken doesn't move around. But Sajasi plays second, third, short. I guarantee you, if you gave him an outfield glove, he could play left field.
How many do you think Nootbaar could hit if he could stay healthy?
To me, there's no question that he's a 20 homer guy if he can stay on the field. No question. If you look at The batted ball numbers, like how hard he hits the ball and how frequently he hits the ball hard. Just to give you an example. So his average exit velocity is in the top 12% in Major League Baseball. His bat speed is well above average. When you look at like the last, when you look at like his career, his 162 game average, which is not perfect because nobody's going to play 162 games, right? But just to give you like a little bit of a vibe of what could make sense, his 162 game average is 19 home runs. So I don't think there's much doubt that if he can stay in the lineup, if he can just play 130 games, he's probably a 20, 25 homer guy with a lot of doubles to go with it. I mean, again, I'm citing home runs because it's an easy thing to count and talk about, right? We could all conceptualize this. Mason Wynn might be a 40 double guy. He had 30 something this year as a rookie. If he hits 40 doubles and 7 or 8 triples and 18 home runs, that's a lot of power. That's a lot of extra base. So again, power does not just mean home runs, but home runs are kind of the easiest way to describe it.
It's the Gashouse Gang with Kevin Wheeler. I'm Tom Ackerman. We're talking about the power potential of the Cardinals. And this really does come down to, not to put more pressure on the kid, and he's not a kid anymore, he's 24, but that's Nolan Gorman. I mean, yeah. Gorman could easily lead this team in home runs. If he finds it, if he unlocks, if Brant Brown can unlock whatever's going on there with him and cut down on those strikeouts, or maybe not. Maybe he does strike out a lot, but he's still, when he does connect, the ball goes out of the ballpark more often. He's a 30, 40 homer guy without a doubt. My concern is Paul Goldschmidt is going to go to the Houston Astros and hit 40 home runs.
Who he led might the team? Because of the Crawford boxes, though, man. I mean, let's
who led real. The team in home runs in 2024 was Paul Goldschmidt.
It was,
led the team with 22 home runs. As bad of a year as he had and as down as he was, he still led the team in home runs. So they're going to have to replace it somehow, and Gorman is choice number one. Let me ask
keep in mind, Gorman was third on the team in home runs last year, and he played 47 fewer games than Goldie.
I know. That is incredible. It really is. I mean,
the power was there. Just he's a guy where the contact matters. He's got to put the ball in play more. And if he does, then the home runs total will go up.
Yeah. Burleson is a contact guy, hard contact guy who can lift the ball out of the ballpark.
Oh, he'll hit 20 homers. No doubt.
He's got a ton of power in that exit velocity. Let's dip into the minors for a little bit. Do you see anybody, of course, Luken Baker, but he'd be considered a major league guy at this point, kind of a back and forth guy potentially. Do you see anybody that has that potential that's got some pop?
Well, I mean, I think that, he's not considered a quote unquote power hitter. But JJ Weatherholt is going to hit home runs. Like he's going to hit 20 plus just because he's a good hitter. Kind of in the, and don't get me wrong. I think he might have more than that. I mean, but the scouting report on him is more hit tool than power, but the power is there because he's strong and because he just barrels the ball up, right? So he's considered to have above average power. So to me, I would look at him as a 20 to 25 homer guy at his peak in the major leagues, right? Like when he's established, that's probably what he is. And who knows, maybe more. I mean, he's again with the good approach, with good strike zone judgment, the guy makes really good swing decisions and he puts the ball in play. That could be more, but I'd say he's safely that. But, after that, the next power guy is probably Chase Davis.
Mm-hmm.
Chase has a lot of chase to his game. He strikes out quite a bit, kind of like Nolan Gorman that we're talking about there. But he's a guy that was drafted out of a major college who was viewed as a guy with power. He has definitely got more power than hit tool. And if you look at him compared to Weatherholt, they kind of rate the same in terms of like in-game power. But Weatherholt has the hit tool, and that's why he's a top 100 prospect and a top guy. After that, there's not a lot of home run power in the organization. It's not really how the guys. That's not really, those guys are not that. I'm a little bit interested to see if Travis Honeyman has a little bit more power. He didn't play very much last year. He only got to 20 games, but he's a really athletic guy. He's got good size. I'm almost wondering if he might be a Lars Nootbaar type prospect that's always been athletic and early in his pro career anyway, had a hard time staying healthy, but he's got some pop because of his strength. The question will be, can he access it in games? There's a guy that I know reasonably well from his college time. Seth Levinson played at the University of Miami. He had good power in college, but he really hasn't put that power on display as a pro. But, when you're looking at this team, Tom, like organizational depth, that's not an area of strength. It's not something they have a ton of on its way. Now, Jimmy Crooks has a little pop, the catcher, from the left side. So, he's not a quote home run hitter, but he's got a little pop. So I think I'd probably have to throw him in that conversation too.
Yeah, in Pac-12 competition, Chase Davis hit 21 home runs for Arizona in that last year. That's what got us all excited. Then, as you said, last year in the Cardinals minor league system, 112 games he appeared. He struck out 113 times. Yeah. He hit 12 home runs.
And keep in mind that the majority of that was below AA, because I think he only played like 8, 9, 10 games at AA.
Yes, and at Springfield, he hit 1 home run. But it was in 31 plate appearances. So,
so it's not a lot. But this is my point, though. If you're striking out once a game in A-ball, got some work. Now, he has talent, though. He has bat speed.
Love his swing.
Yeah, he has bat speed. His is a lot more like Gorman. It's a lot more about more contact, barreling the ball more often. It's not about the ability to hit power, like raw power, batting practice power. He's got that. He's got bat speed. The question is, can it translate to the game by making enough contact?
Do you see a scenario where the Cardinals go shop around for somebody with power, or they make a trade that could include a little bit of a power surge back their way?
I mean, to me, that's the story of the offseason when it comes to what you're seeking in trades, right? To me, you should be seeking power arms and power bats. I think they have a lot of other things, right? I think they're good long-term on the catching position, both short and long-term, right? I mean, they've got 4 or 5 guys. When Crooks will be at Memphis this year, you've got 3 quality catchers, not even counting Wilson Contreras, who could always be an emergency option, right? But like you have 3 quality catchers in Pages and Herrera and Crooks, and that's not even counting Bernal, who's going to be a step behind that at AA, I would think, this year. So you're covered there. You're really good in the middle infield, both at the major league level and in the minor leagues. You've got good pitching, but you don't always have the big power arms. So, I mean, again, power, and you never have enough arms in a system, right? I think they got plenty of athletes. I mentioned Travis Honeyman. They got a few other guys that are pretty good athletes. They just don't have a lot of power. And if I'm going to look for a return on Ryan Helsley as an example, it's going to be somebody who can hit balls over the fence, or another guy with, upper 90s velo as a part of a package. Like, power is what I'd be seeking if I were them on both sides.
Boy, they sure have a lot of catchers. I kind of feel like someone's going to get traded here. I think they have a lot, not Contreras, but they have a lot of questions coming about their catchers. I want to get your take on Crooks a little bit more, because I remember when Herrera was being hyped as the next one, and we all were into it. And then we saw Herrera play at this level, and we're like, he still has some work to do behind the plate. But the guy looks like a major league hitter ready to go. Everything I hear about Crooks, and again, I don't get to see him in person, but I've watched some of his stuff. He's balanced. He's good behind the plate. He's a good hitter. But should we pump the brakes a little bit because he has not been at the AAA level really yet? I mean, he's going to start for AAA this year.
I mean, I don't know if the brakes need to be pumped. I mean, he's legitimately one of their better prospects. The question is, whether or not he profiles as an everyday guy or maybe just as a platoon guy. Mm-hmm. And by the way, if somebody eventually gets traded, my bet would be on it being on Herrera. Nothing against him, but like he'll have value because of his bat, right? Yeah. So, and I think they love Pages for the defense. And if they look at it longer term and they say, man, and Crooks, by the way, Crooks has a reputation for being a guy that pitchers like.
Yeah.
Right. And he has arm strength. He hasn't always been the greatest when it comes to throwing people out, but he's got arm strength. He's a natural catcher. And if he continues to grow the way the Cardinals like their catchers to be, good with the pitching staff, good running games, things like that, man, pretty good combo to have him as a left-handed hitter and Pages as a right-handed hitter. And you attack it, maybe it's 50-50, maybe one guy gets a little bit more, but that's a pretty good combo for a number of years. Left-handed hitting catchers are really valuable. So a guy like Crooks can be really important in that regard, even if he's the backup, even if he's just, if he's going to play 40% of the time, that's a nice asset to have. So I think that the guy that would more likely be traded would be Herrera, but probably not right now. I would imagine they want to give him a year hitting regularly in the big leagues. And then if he goes out and hits for some power, now you've got a bigger trade piece.
Without a doubt. You see the question there from Bill. What do you
Which,
think about that in terms of protecting?
yeah, I'm not. I
And
don't
look,
know.
for our radio and audio listeners, Bill suggested with today's deadline and 4 roster spots, who do
Yeah.
they protect?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure that they're going to fill all those spots. And I believe they've already added a couple of guys to the 40 man here in the not too distant future. It's a good question, man.
Yeah.
Because how so let's start with the idea and then we'll get to the name.
For those who don't know, this is Rule 5 protection today. So
right,
today is the day. I gotta say that you're gonna probably add Tink Hence.
Yeah, he's definitely going to be added.
You're gonna add Roby to the 40.
I would say so. Yeah.
Right now they have 36.
Yeah, I mean they have plenty of room. I don't know, like those two are automatics. I would say there's some buzz about maybe Matt Koperniak, who had a good year at Memphis. I'm not sure where he profiles in the organization, but I mean he put up, like in terms of a prospect, but he put up really good numbers at AAA. So maybe he's a guy you want to keep in the organization in case Newt gets hurt, right? In case something happens with Jordan Walker or whatever. Like that he might make some sense in that regard. So I don't know that it's super critical. And by the way, we have to keep in mind, if I'm on the Cardinals side of this, I'm probably going to be a little extra aggressive in protecting a guy or two, because I feel like I'm going to subtract some guys from the 40 man as the offseason goes. Right. I mean, I feel like that's part of the thing that's going to happen is I'm going to make a trade or two here or there. You may or may not be adding anybody who is going to be on that roster. So like, as an example, if I feel like the young reliever, Matt Swanson, if I feel like he's got a chance to help me in the big leagues this year, I probably protect him. I probably keep him around. Why not? I mean, he's a big right-hander with he throws hard with a sinker baller. So, I mean, to me, there's two no-brainers with Hence and Roby. I would probably lean on the side of Koperniak sticking around because, again, if somebody goes down, if Newt has injury problems, he's a corner outfielder who had a good year at Memphis. He would be worth at least a look in that regard. And I would add Swanson or maybe Ian Bedell. He's got a little more upside because he might start. And again, good arms. But, the other part of this is like the relievers, they can stick, right? Like teams will look at Ryan Fernandez. Teams will take guys that they'll put at the back end of their bullpen and just see what happens. So, you may want to go ahead and protect both of those guys if you can. And maybe that's at the expense of somebody else. I mean, tough call. There's 4 or 5 guys there. There's 2 no-brainers and then some decisions. And maybe the decision is because Bedell has potential as a starter, you choose him over Swanson. I don't know. Tough call.
Gashouse gang, Tom Ackerman, Kevin Wheeler. We're sponsored by Bernie Miklas. Brought this one in. Saliga Heating and Cooling. What a great company, man. When you're around since 1927 and you're almost a century in business, that tells you something.
You can see their truck right there.
Heating and Cooling. Great to be with you. Our producers, Drew Young, Kevin, and Tom here. And our old pal, John Buchagras from ESPN, is in town. He tweeted earlier a picture. He was walking around outside of Busch Stadium and talked about how beautiful it is in the morning when the sun is shining. And he said there is no greater baseball town, something along those lines, but baseball in America right here in St. Louis. And it was a neat shot. He's in town to go with the Blues Wild broadcast on ESPN Plus. And, are we a hockey town? Yes. Mm-hmm. Do we have a hockey team in town that is going to make a run? I don't know. But Robert Thomas is healing up quite quickly here. And I think that's a nice, it's not going to change everything, but it certainly could improve morale in that room because something's broken. Something's not right. I mean, they lose those 2 8-1 games in the middle of a slump. They go to Boston and play this inspired, awesome game. Braden Shen scores the winner. He's all smiles afterwards. And then they go and lay another egg against a very good Carolina team, I will add. Yeah. But they still they just can't find consistency. What do you see in the Blues?
Yeah. So short term, I mean, again, we nobody thought this was a highly competitive team, right? I mean, we were like, if they have a good year, maybe they sneak into the bottom part of the Western Conference playoff picture, right? But they've lost 8 of 11. There have been times where you show a flash, like you play really well against Boston, you play really well against Toronto a couple of times, and then you got games where you're just a complete no-show. And my bigger worry, I guess is the right way to put it, is less about now, but what's the long-term path forward? Where is this team? How is this team returning to contention with this core of players? Because the farm system's not loaded. They don't have like a bunch of top dudes getting ready to break through. It's not like it was when you were coming out of the lockout, right? And we could all say, hey, the kids are coming. TJ Oshie and David Perron, Eric Johnson, all the kids are coming. Alex Pietrangelo. It's not like that.
It's kind of like the same situation that the Cardinals are in, where they don't have
a little bit, yeah,
all these young prospects, but they have all these like early 20-somethings that they are ready to break out.
Yeah, and I actually think, like when you're talking about farm system and potential impact, the Cardinals have way more. They have a lot more guys. I mean, Tink Hence could be a stud. I mean, you're looking at guys like Weatherholt, who might be an all-star. And like he would, if the Blues had a couple of guys at that level in the farm system, ideally somebody on the blue line would be great. I would feel a lot better. But I'm at a loss. Like the cap situation's not good, and it's not good around the league. It's really hard to move contracts, and then when you're trying to move contracts of underperforming players, I don't know. This is going to be a while, I guess, is my point. Like what we see now, they're not the dregs of the league, right? They're not the worst team in the league. They're not a team that's going to be probably not going to be picking near the top 2 or 3 or 4, which is another problem all by itself. Because I think the worst place you can be in the NHL is kind of stuck in the lower half of the middle. Because you're not going to get at the top and get those potential franchise players right out of the gate. And you're not good enough to be a playoff team or make a run. And it's a tough spot. Because what do you do, Tom? If everybody else is capped out and you're capped out too, and the players you want to move come with big numbers, what do you do?
All right. No, exactly.
I mean, what do you do?
Well, the only thing you can do is hope that your draft picks develop. Zach Bolduc is still probably a year away from making a big impact, but the guy was the 17th overall pick in the NHL draft. Scott Perunovich should be turning the corner by now. He is a second-round pick.
Man, he's the Lars Nootbaar of the Blues, isn't he? Just like,
yeah, I mean, your second round pick as a defenseman has to be a high caliber NHL defenseman in time. But I do start to hear those great, encouraging words about Perunovich, and that's a big development. And as I mentioned, Robert Thomas has developed into that guy. And yes, his presence today, if he does indeed play, and Craig, I did say that earlier, thank you very much, that he is healthy and would be that would improve morale in the room with him showing up and playing. But I do appreciate that, Craig. And Kyrou has come into his own. He's better and better as a scorer, but you wanted him to be a two-way player. I don't know, maybe he is what he is. You just try to make him into a two-way player, but you mostly turn him loose and let him make plays and score. But at this level, you have to be great on both ends of the ice. You just have to be. So, hopefully Bolduc becomes that guy. But that's it, Kevin. I mean, you just have to hope that the players that you've drafted over the last 2, 3, 4 years develop into high caliber players.
Yeah, and I know he's hurt now, but a guy that can be a part of what we're talking about is Broberg. He showed a lot in the 12 games before he got hurt. I think he's got a lot of upside. That's a former first-round pick. Dylan Holloway is a former first-round pick. So those guys have some growth and some upside. And I guess where I get frustrated is not really the right word, because we knew that the roster was what it was. Like Robert Thomas is a damn good player.
He really is.
And Jordan Kyrou is a damn good player. But I mean, right now I think he's on pace for 20 goals. Is that enough? Like, does he have to be a 30-35 guy to be an impact? Because he's not. I mean, he's better. He's been better this year as far as playing the whole game and doing all that, but it's still not like he's not high end in that regard. So if you're not going to be a 30, 35, 40 goal guy, then I guess this is the thing. How many of these guys are top line players on the contenders? play on the top line, the number one power play unit.
Yeah, this is just
maybe the two guys we just mentioned. Maybe.
This is just like the Cardinals situation where we're like, how many would be coveted by all playoff contending teams? Mason Wynn and Ryan Helsley and Brendan Donovan. I mean, and Contreras when now that he's back.
Sure.
But other than that.
Yeah, and the great thing about baseball though is there's no salary cap.
Mm-hmm.
They've moved on some payroll, and in the next year or two, once they've settled, that you got a little bit better longer term picture on the TV side of things, on the local TV side of things, and you've sorted out some of the young guys, the Cardinals will have the ability to get their payroll back to 170, 180, 190 million if they choose to do it. It all depends on how the young guys do, right? Because they're cheap. So if the young guys perform well, the payroll won't be that high. But they have that ability. They can just decide, we want a $30 million a year player in free agency and go bid on him. The Blues can't do it. I mean, it's the nature of the sport. It's not their fault, but they can't do that. They don't have that option. And the stars in hockey almost never hit free agency anyway. So it's tough, man. And I'm not saying they're going to be bad, but I mean, I'm having a hard time seeing the path out of this to being a contender anytime in the next few years. And I'm not trying to be negative. I love the Blues, man. I mean, we had them on KMOX all those years. I was doing pre and post game in some of the darkest years of the Blues, right? Curbs and I mean, Tom, we used to have to pull up YouTube during commercial breaks on post game shows and watch like scare prank videos and fart prank videos just to lighten the mood because it was so bad. It was so bad. And it got better. It got better pretty fast because of all those kids, but you don't have that wave ready to come right now. And again, this team's not that bad either, right? It's not like that team. Those teams were brutal.
I felt bad for you. I really felt bad for you. My first year doing Blues pre, post, and intermissions, they won the President's Trophy. So, I mean, they were unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they got good they got really good pretty shortly after that. So believe me, when we had a lot of fun with those following in those next couple of years, because it wasn't long after all that they had the big miracle run late in the year, and they ended up getting swept by Vancouver. But getting to the playoffs with all that young roster and Andy Murray's team, like there was a lot of fun there at some point. And again, this team is not at that low level. It's not the team coming out of the lockout that had been stripped of all of its good high-priced players, right? It's not that, but you're just kind of in purgatory, right? You're just stuck in the lower part of the middle third, or maybe the upper part of the bottom third of the league, whichever way you want to look at it.
The Gashouse Gang on KMOX and our KMOX Sports social media channels, including YouTube. Absolutely subscribe to that. And while you're there, subscribe to the Bernie Show. Our pal Bernie Miklas is up to 7,000 subscribers. He cranks out some great videos. Sponsored by Saliga Heating and Cooling. All right, Kevin, we were talking about payroll with the Blues. Speaking of payroll, let's talk college football. The great sport of college football. I've never had more fun in my life watching Indiana make a run at this thing. They're 10-0. I hope they go to Columbus feeling confident and going up there, not to think how close can we make this game, but going in there thinking, let's go win this game. Now, there's a lot that is being talked about with regard to Indiana's schedule, it being soft. Kevin, it's not their fault. When their schedule came out last year, Michigan was the third-ranked team in the CFP. Washington was 5. Heck, UCLA was top 20 CFP at that point last year, and they stunk this year. And Washington did, and Michigan did. And it's not Indiana's fault that those teams were bad. And they went out and torched everybody by 14 or more until Michigan came along and played an inspired defensive game. So all of that said, I know the potential of Ohio State blowing them out. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think that they're a very balanced, talented team that's going to go in there and play good, solid, disciplined football and make it interesting. One common opponent I'll throw at you is that Ohio State beat Nebraska 21-17 in a hard-fought game in Columbus. Indiana played them in Bloomington with a backup quarterback, by the way, in the second half and beat them 56-7. My point is Indiana does have the capability of getting things going very quickly on you. They'll have to be at their very, very best, though, this Saturday.
Yeah, the thing I like about them and the thing that gives them a chance against Ohio State is they're so buttoned up. They are so detail oriented, and you don't see a lot of the dumb stuff from them that you see from other teams. Like my team, I'm for some reason Miami is always one of the dumbest teams. We don't know how to manage a clock. You can't get lined up coming out of a timeout. They're talented and they've got a great quarterback, but they aren't great at that. You'll see a lot of times on defense where they're just not lined up when the ball is snapped. You're like, what are we doing? We practice like 60 hours a week, man. But I don't see that when I watch Indiana. I see a team that's kind of where they're supposed to be when they're supposed to be there. And, obviously he brought in a lot of guys from JMU, so they know what he wants them to be, and they can kind of set the tone for everybody else. I think that's a rare thing, Tom, in college football right now, the teams that are really buttoned up, the teams that are really like on schedule, on time, lined up properly, not taking stupid penalties. That goes a long way. And by the way, they're also talented. I'm not trying to diminish that part, but it's something I really admire about what Cignetti's done there in a very short amount of time. And it shows you the weaknesses in other places. Because, Ohio State hasn't always been like that. Ohio State, this year, Ohio State's very talented. They got a bunch of NFL dudes on both sides of the ball, but I'm not sure that they're quite as buttoned up, which is what I think gives Indiana a chance. I'm a little surprised that it's a 13.5-point spread, and it wouldn't shock me, right? It wouldn't shock me if Ohio State wins by 2 or 3 touchdowns. It's not that crazy, but I wouldn't expect it because of the things I said about IU. And what's really interesting, Tom, is, when I'm talking like expanding it, and you're talking about your strength of schedule and all that, like you can't control your conference. You can't. Look, Miami's in the ACC. The ACC stinks. There's nothing you can do about that because in a normal year, Clemson can be a championship team, and Florida State. What? Tom, did you see the stat on Florida State today? I got to take a dig at my rival. They are the only team in FBS that hasn't scored 21 points in the game this year.
It's unbelievable.
The only
it really
team.
is. It is incredible. What? Meanwhile, SMU's pretty good in the ACC.
Yeah, they're very good. Yeah,
I like the way they look.
Yeah. By the way, former Miami offensive coordinator there who took a lot of the guys in transfer portal from Miami to there, so they got some talent.
It's really a cool thing. I love the fact that there is no clear-cut number one. There just isn't. The closest thing to it's Oregon and Ohio State, who went at it and played an awesome game that Oregon won by a point. I think Texas' schedule is kind of soft, honestly. Their best win is Vanderbilt. What else did they do? They beat Oklahoma. Oklahoma's not any good. So I think it's wide open. I love this. I think it's great.
Yeah, I think Oregon is very well established as the deserving number one, right? They're the only major conference undefeated, so they are, and they have the best win of anybody with the win against Ohio State.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're, and I should give them some credit. They beat a pretty good Boise State team too.
They did.
That's it's only a 3-point win, and Boise's pretty good. So that's a quality win for them. And they only have one game left. So, one game left. They're going to be in the Big Ten championship game. They're going to be in a position. By the way, am I right in seeing that right now that they would be facing Indiana in that game?
Well,
you guys might get Ohio State and then another game and then have to play Oregon again after that if you win. But you got to win this week.
That game would be in Indianapolis. We might have a few fans there.
Oh,
but yeah. But it's just crazy. I'm just so fired up for this Saturday. I can't even tell you. And then we'll see what happens. I think this has been a fascinating year where you can come up with the standings and the rankings and still say you have no idea what is going to happen because there will be upsets. There will be teams that are knocking each other out. The SEC feels like they got about 1 million teams in there. To answer your question, Michael, before we go, I think Colorado is going to sneak in there. I think they're hot right now, and I think they're going to find a way. Kevin, we're out of time, but you got the DGS coming. DGS, I'm going to join you on the DGS today.
Nice. What time are you coming on?
I think they told me either 2:30 or 3.
So I know when to leave the studio. Does that mean I have to leave?
They said 2:30 or 3. Does that mean I'm on for an hour? I don't know.
How we are on DGS, man. Anybody that wants to hang out can hang out as long as they want.
All right.
We're just a group of friends doing a party.
Yeah. Thanks to everybody who checked in, Chris and Michael and Craig and Bill. And we got a lot of people and some very nice comments from people like Chris, who said we're deserving of a larger audience. Don't you worry. This thing's picking up. It's
Yeah.
big time steam.
I mean, if you're looking at downloads and you're looking at total views, like, yeah, if you look at it any moment, it's probably not what you'd expect. But when you look at the downloads on the podcast and everything, it's getting there, man. It's getting there.
Thank you. Thank you for the compliment. For Kevin Wheeler, I'm Tom Ackerman, our producer, Drew Young. Thank you for watching the Gashouse Gang.